What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into the 6th episode of Welcome to Derry. Now, after last week's return of Pennywise the Dancing Clown, we take a trip back to Mrs. Kersh's past and learn about her complex relationship with her father, Bob Gray. Meanwhile, we watch some of our characters get to experience a moment of joy and happiness before it all comes burning down. With that said, time to take a sip of some Air Force Coke and enjoy some of these characters' last moments before saying goodbye. Let's unpack everything that happened in this episode. Full spoilers ahead. We open with a flashback that's shot in black and white that takes us back to the asylum that's in 1935 as we see a nurse whom identity is revealed later as she wakes up a little girl by the name of Mabel and takes her downstairs to the basement. Mabel didn't want to go down there in the first place, but this nurse assures her that there's nothing to be afraid of. As they arrive in the basement, it's here that we learn that Mabel was told to meet a clown down here. And suddenly, a single bright red balloon floats into the frame, which looks so vibrant against the black and white setting. Mabel is afraid and tries to leave, but the nurse has her stay. We watch as the balloon drifts towards the doorway, and slowly Pennywise's hand emerges, grabbing the string, and then he shows his face. It's important to remember that this 1935 setting will be the time period that season 2 takes place, and also remembering that that's where the Bradley massacre occurred, which will most likely be the bloody event that particular season will lead to. This opening scene serves as a key moment for not just this episode, but also serves as the exact same purpose as the 1908 flashback did in episode 3. These are basically small previews of its violence, but also gives us a preview of what to expect as far as the characters and somewhat of the story as well. Now, I anticipate season 2 will explore more of what we're seeing in this opening scene as it involves this nurse who we later discover is Mrs. Kersh, and maybe we'll even get more of little Mabel's story and her first encounters with it that most likely led her into this asylum at a young age. Now, back at the school, we find Lily in the classroom reliving her encounter with Pennywise in the sewers, as we see she's still holding that weapon close to her for protection. Now, as she opens her desk, she finds her father inside mocking her, which causes her to freaking out in front of the classroom in front of everyone once again, as we see the weapon is glowing. Now, Lily ultimately leaves the classroom without the teacher's permission as she's headed to her friend looking for some comfort. We see her seeking comfort from her friend as she arrives at Mrs. Kersh's house, but before entering, the next door neighbor looks at Lily with a creepy smile. Now, no one answers the door as Lily decides to walk in anyway and hears music coming from the attic, and she heads upstairs. As she looks around, she finds a photo album, and we get this little Easter egg here because if you notice, the teacup that's in the frame is the same one we saw Mrs. Kersh using in It Chapter 2 in the scene that she had with Beverly. Now, in this photo album, Lily looks at the pictures of Mrs. Kersh and Stan getting married, celebrating their anniversary, and more pictures of Ingrid in her younger years. But as she turns the page, we see a younger version of Mrs. Kersh revealing that she was a nurse from the opening scene that took Mabel into the basement with Pennywise. Now, as Lily continues to turn the page, she finds a little Ingrid in 1908 with Bob Gray, and Lily starts to see the similarities between him and Pennywise. Now, Mrs. Kersh arrives as Lily tells her about what happened in the sewers, and she begins crying and runs into her arms. Now, Lily notices more pictures in the corner of the room of Bob Gray dressed as Pennywise as Mrs. Kersh asks if she's seen him and begins crying and laughing with joy.
Oh, sweetheart, you did it. You did it. Oh, Lily, of course it was you.
She's happy to learn that Lily brought Pennywise back, and Lily notices her old costume in the corner of the room, and it's the same one I suspected she wore that I knew wasn't Pennywise back in episode 4, same one she wore outside of Will's room. Now, this is where Mrs. Kersh explains her past history with her father, the carnival performer who went by the name and dressed as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. She claims her father was taken from her, and despite the carnival leaving town, she remained in Derry. We flash back to 1935 to seeing the young Mrs. Kersh back in the asylum, overhearing Mabel talking to a doctor about hearing from Pennywise. This was the moment she knew that this was her chance of seeing her father again. We cut back to the basement scene from the opening, but this time we see it in its entirety. We watch as Pennywise greets himself to Mabel and hands her the balloon as Ingrid calls Pennywise Papa, and we can see this look on Pennywise's face as this is an opportunity to using her. By the way, I absolutely love the creative decision of having the flashbacks being in black and white to really highlight the glow in Pennywise's eyes, but also the red balloon and later on the blood. It also, to me, symbolizes Ingrid seeing the world in black and white, but the color in her life only came when she was with her papa, Bob Gray, aka Pennywise. Now, not too much after his introduction to Mabel, we see Pennywise attacks as they run away from it. Now, as they're running, we see Mabel falls and gets left behind as Ingrid runs to a steel door that locks behind her, but she notices Mabel isn't behind her anymore and she can't reopen the door. Now, unfortunately for Mabel, she gets eaten on the other side of the door by Pennywise. Now, I personally believe that Ingrid was sad and upset to what happened to Mabel in this moment and probably blames herself for her death, but that all goes away once she hears the carnival music playing and Pennywise disguises himself as her father, Bob Gray.
Pumpkin, it's me, Papa.
He tells her that he's missed her all these years and he can explain where he's been this whole time if she opens the door and let him in. As we watch, she opens the door and believes her father has returned, but in reality, she has let it warp her mind into believing that this is her actual father. Now, back in the attic, we learn that Mrs. Kersh has made herself believe that she was freeing her father of the shadow she called Pennywise, and she did whatever she could to assure that she saw her father by basically giving him children all these years as a sacrifice. Mrs. Kersh says that her father used to call her Periwinkle and just wants to remind her father of the times they shared together. Now, she sees how afraid Lily is in this moment and promises to never hurt her, but she can't say the same for her friends as she believes Lily would understand this sacrifice since she knows what it's like to lose a father. Now, Mrs. Kersh invites Lily to join her and seeing her father Pennywise again as Lily cuts her hand and escapes the house, screaming in the streets because of the feeling of being betrayed by who she thought was her friend. Yet again, we are reminded that Lily never gets a moment of peace and joy, and she can never catch a damn break. Now, before moving on, I wonder if this explains Mrs. Kersh's relationship with Hank. Did she see Ronnie as a potential way to seeing Pennywise her father again? I wonder if Mrs. Kersh ever tried to have kids with Stan and use her kids as a way to sacrifice them to seeing her father again as well. I'm pretty confident that this isn't the last time we've seen her backstory and her relationship with it. Again, I'm hoping to get more this season, but I know we'll definitely see it again in both seasons 2 and 3 of this show, and it will probably reveal more of Bob Gray as well. Now let's take a moment to reflect and actually talk about this Bob Gray backstory and clear some things up about Bob Gray and talk about the birth of Pennywise. Now, in doing so, it's important to remember that this show and the previous It movies under director Andy Muschietti isn't always a one-for-one adaptation of the Stephen King novel It. Now, for those who have read the book, we know that Andy Muschietti has made some creative liberties in telling this story, but he's also expanded and even made certain pieces of the lore a little bit better, going more in depth where the book remained vague, and Bob Gray is one of those examples. Going back to 2019's It Chapter 2, and now in this very episode, it has now been more explicitly shown to us as an audience that Pennywise was an actual clown who has been possessed by it. Now, in my personal opinion, this episode just made it more apparent that Andy Muschietti is separating his Bob Gray from the books, as he's made it more clear that his version of Bob Gray as Pennywise was an actual human being who it most likely killed at some point, and he took his identity and enjoyed it so much that he incorporated his identity as the clown persona into his own Rolodex of monsters. I found various interviews dating back to 2019 and even some recent interviews in anticipation of the show of him saying that Bob Gray was important to him and was one of the main reasons that Bill Skarsgård decided to return back to the role. In referencing the book, I found a quote from Andy Muschietti talking about how everything that relates to Pennywise and Bob Gray is very cryptic, and it's like that for a reason, Andy Muschietti said. Probably the success of that character as a monster, as a villain, is because of the crypticness and the uncertainty that people have towards him. We don't know exactly what he is, where he comes from, or how Bob Gray is even related. Was Bob Gray a real person? Is he incarnated in that thing because Bob Gray played a clown? He knew it attracted kids, so it was a perfect bait. Now, for me personally, I've enjoyed the breadcrumbs we've gotten thus far about the origins of Bob Gray and Pennywise, not only in It Chapter 2, but also in this very episode. Now, I'm sure we'll see and hear in coming interviews from the cast and crew about the backstory of Ingrid and Bob and Pennywise connections, and also season 2 and 3 will most likely explore this more. Now, I'm also sure that this will be a topic of conversation after this episode, and I know that some people like myself will like this backstory and understanding and origins of Pennywise and Bob Gray, but also know some people will hate it. But let me know in the comments your thoughts and understanding of this backstory that we got in this episode in the comments below. Dressing up in her old outfit, ready to find her papa Pennywise, and most likely headed to the black spot. Which again makes me believe that she set up Hank this whole time. But here's where the real horror arrives. As Bowers and the others, now with masks and guns, are prepared to fulfill the augury and start one of the most horrific events in Derry's history. The black spot is about to be burned down by racists, with many of our favorite characters inside. Again, remember, this is a combination of the hatred that grows in Derry, but also this is all being orchestrated by it, making Hank being the lead suspect in what happens to the kids back in episode 1. Even though it wasn't confirmed yet, it's safe to assume that it also played a part in Hank being able to escape from the bus. All of these chaotic, hateful events were strands it pulled to lead to this very tragic moment. Now again, in the book, this event was handled a little bit differently, but I would imagine some of the important elements will stay. For example, Dick Halloran tried his best to save as many lives as he could in the fire, including Will. Now, based on the trailers of the show, we know that Marge and Ronnie are seen in scenes that we haven't seen yet, so they're going to be safe, but I would bet that unfortunately many will die, including Hank and Rich, especially after both of them made statements about not being able to be separated from their loved ones, and Rich getting closer to Marge. I thought this was a really good setup for next week. Questions that remain is, what will Lily do with the information about Ingrid and Pennywise? Will we learn if Ingrid used Hank to get Ronnie as bait? Will Dick Halloran stop his drinking and join the fight? Who will live? Who will die after the black spot? So overall, again, I saw this episode as a setup for the final 2 episodes, and this being a moment for some of our characters experiencing a moment of peace before it all comes burning down. The Ingrid and the Pennywise reveal and Bob Gray and the flashback was personally my favorite part of this episode, followed by the young puppy love scenes that we saw with Ronnie and Will and Marge and Rich. Also like the connection of the title being in the name of the father and how it ties to the thematic story of some of these characters' complex relationships with their fathers. Whether it be Ingrid and Bob Gray, we have Lily losing her father, the disconnect with Will and Leroy, and of course Dick Halloran, who it wasn't his father, but his grandfather and him had problems, and obviously he was frightened of him. With all that said, I think this is a great place to end this week's breakdown of episode 6 of season 1 of Welcome to Derry. So I'll leave it to you all. What did you all think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts, your takeaways, your deeper meanings, what worked, what didn't work, your predictions, your theories of what you all hope to see in the weeks ahead in the comments below. Thank you all for watching or listening to this breakdown. Hit that like button, it really helps out the channel and helps this video get in front of new viewers. Also, consider sharing this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. And last but not least, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel where we discuss things like Welcome to Derry, we're covering Pluribus, we're covering all the new movies coming out. Also, recently we got the return of the 5th and final season of Stranger Things. So if that sounds like something you all would like to enjoy and be a part of, again, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. Alrighty, y'all, until next time, remember that you all are awesome, stay safe out there, and remember, never follow any nurses into a basement, especially if it involves a clown. Alrighty, y'all, I'll see you again soon.